Have you ever wondered if buffer zones truly deter conflicts or do they merely delay the inevitable? These zones, often established in areas of political tension, serve as a sort of no man's land, designed to prevent or minimize conflict. They are a neutral territory where neither side can claim dominance, hence reducing the likelihood of direct confrontation. But what happens when these zones are violated, as was recently the case between North and South Korea? Despite the buffer zones, tensions escalated, artillery shells were fired, and peace was put on the line. It raises a question: are buffer zones losing their effectiveness? To understand the question better, let's delve into the recent events that unfolded between North and South Korea. Our story begins with South Korea announcing its annual defense drills. These exercises were designed to enhance South Korea's ability to respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The drills, though routine, did not sit well with their northern neighbors. In response, North Korea fired a staggering 350 rounds of artillery off its east and west coasts. These shells fell within maritime buffer zones established by the two Koreas in 2018. This marked the second time North Korea violated the agreement by firing shells into these buffer zones, a clear indication of escalating tensions. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff responded by urging North Korea to halt its actions, stating that they undermine peace and stability. However, North Korea saw things differently. They claimed that the shots were a warning in response to South Korea's own artillery training. The North's recent weapons tests, including missile launches, have been in response to what it perceives as provocative military drills by the US and South Korea. In the midst of this tense standoff, Japan and South Korea took decisive action. They imposed sanctions on North Korea in response to its aggressive actions. It's believed by some experts that North Korea's ultimate aim with these provocations is to pressure the US and others to accept it as a legitimate nuclear state and lift the economic sanctions that have been placed on it. This sequence of events has brought the effectiveness of buffer zones under scrutiny. These zones were put in place to reduce tensions and create a space for dialogue, but the recent artillery firing by North Korea has raised questions about whether they are still serving their intended purpose. It's clear that the situation between North and South Korea is complex and fraught with danger. But one thing is certain: the effectiveness of the buffer zones is now a topic of serious debate. Now that we have a good understanding of the situation, let's summarize the key points. Buffer zones, those spaces established to minimize conflicts and foster peace, have been a significant tool in the geopolitics of the Korean Peninsula. However, recent events have brought their effectiveness into question. Let's recap. North Korea fired 350 rounds of artillery off its coasts near the border with South Korea. This was in response to South Korea's annual defense drills, which are designed to enhance their ability to respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. The shells fell within the maritime buffer zones that were established by the two Koreas in the year 2018. Notably, this is not the first time North Korea has violated this agreement. This marks the second instance of North Korea firing shells into these buffer zones, which were designated as areas of non-aggression. The South Korean Joint Chiefs of Staff have called upon North Korea to halt these actions, stating that they undermine peace and stability. In response to North Korea's actions, both Japan and South Korea have imposed sanctions. The actions of North Korea are believed by some experts to be an attempt to pressure the United States and others to accept it as a legitimate nuclear state and to lift economic sanctions. But what does this mean for the future? The actions of North Korea have challenged the effectiveness of buffer zones, and they raise questions about the stability of the region. The disregard for these buffer zones by North Korea has the potential to escalate tensions and trigger conflicts. So, we find ourselves in a precarious situation. Buffer zones, traditionally seen as a means to maintain peace and minimize conflict, are being tested. Their effectiveness is being questioned as they are repeatedly violated. The respect for these boundaries, or the lack thereof, can have serious implications for the peace and stability of the region. It appears that the effectiveness of buffer zones is not absolute and depends on the willingness of parties to respect these boundaries. So, are buffer zones losing their effectiveness, or are they being blatantly ignored? It's a question that remains to be answered.